Reddit by Reddit recap. What sounds like fiction but is actually a real historical event. English king named Ethelred, later called the Unready, took some troops to defend against a Viking invasion. The weather was bad, so a lot of the Vikings' ships crashed as they were landing. Ethelred thought that it would be dishonorable to attack them as they were stumbling onto shore, so he kept his troops back until the Vikings had a chance to get together and form proper battle lines before he attacked them. The better prepared Vikings then won the fight and slaughtered a bunch of Ethelred's men, and he and the rest were forced to run away while the Vikings went around pillaging. The CIA was researching psychic abilities for 30 years as a way to spy on the USSR. After 30 years, the program was terminated, and their conclusion was that psychic powers probably don't exist. Not exactly historical, but a poodle named Cachi, in Caballito, Buenos Aires, fell from 13 floors and fatally hit 75-year-old Marta Espina, killing both instantly. In the course of the events, 46-year-old Edith Sola, who came to see the incident, was fatally hit by a bus. An unidentified man, who witnessed Edith's death, had a heart attack and also died on his way to the hospital. Jandy Clisson, 1300-1359, was married to a French nobleman who was beheaded for treason by the French king. Enraged, she sold their estate and purchased 3 black warships with red sails, and became a pirate queen of the English Channel who targeted French ships. She became known as the Lioness of Brittany, and in her 13 years of piracy she would slaughter every member of a ship's crew except for one so that last survivor could go back and tell the French king what had happened. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in 1838 in which 4 shipwreck survivors, at the point of starvation, choose to resort to cannibalism, so they kill the young cabin boy, Richard Parker, and eat him. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank. 4 crew members survived. At the point of starvation, they killed and ate the youngest of them, Richard Parker. Sergeant Stubby. During World War I, a soldier found a stray dog when training on the Yale University campus, and took a liking to him. The soldier snuck the dog onto the ship when he had to leave campus, and when the dog was found by the commanding officer, he was allowed to stay because he had learned how to salute. Stubby was injured a few times during the war, but he was useful with alerting his squad of surprise mustard gas attacks and gunshots before the human ear could detect the sound. He also found and comforted wounded soldiers and caught a German soldier by the leg of his pants until American soldiers got to him, aka the bestest boy to ever live. Timothy Dexter was frequently given terrible business advice that would somehow through a stroke of luck pay off. He sold coal to Newcastle and made a profit. He became insanely wealthy, dressed in a strange manner, and acted weird in the company of the incredibly wealthy elite he had accidentally stumbled into. He spent a lot of time basically gaslighting his own wife for his own amusement. For quite some time he acted as if she had died and was a ghost, even introducing her to other people as his wife's ghost. He at one point even faked his own death so he could see how people would react at his funeral. He also wrote a book that was a long-winded rant about everything that upset him. The book included no punctuation. He made a second edition with several pages of punctuation attached to the end that the reader could distribute as they saw fit. Basically a real-life post. The London beer flood of 1814. A 22-foot tall beer vat blew out and at least 100,000 to as much as 323,000 imperial gallons give or take flooded slim dwellings, killing 8 people. 5 of those people killed were at the time at a celebration of life service for someone else. During WW1 the German Navy built a ship and painted it to make it look like a British ship called the RMS Carmania in order to infiltrate and destroy British convoys. On the ship's first outing, the first enemy it encountered was the real RMS Carmania, which promptly sunk it. At Jack Churchill, the man with the only confirmed longbow kill in WWII, Guy and his squad did a death march towards the Germans while playing bagpipes, got captured and sent to a concentration camp. He then escaped, got caught again, and then escaped a different concentration camp. Also he always carried a Scottish longsword with him. There's so much other weird she did after the war, and it's amazing to me that he's entirely real. Battle for Castle Litter near the end of WWII saw us soldiers, French POWs, and the German army fighting on the same side to hold the castle against an SS tank division. To make it even weirder, the French prisoners included several prime ministers and a tennis star. Wojtek was a bear who fought Nazis in return for cigarettes and beer. He didn't die until 20 years after WW2. My favorite part about that story is that after the war he lived in a zoo. It was common for soldiers from the bear's company to come visit and simply jump into the enclosure to play with him, much to the zookeeper's annoyance. Operation Mincemeat. The Allies planted a dead body with fake battle plans to trick the Germans into thinking that the Allies were going to attack Sardinia when they were in fact going to attack Sicily. They built an entire life for this dead, fake, military man, dumped him in the ocean, and successfully distracted the Germans. The Soviet scientists starving to death saving the seed bank of Leningrad during Hitler's invasion in the winter of 1941-42 despite it being full of corn, wheat and potatoes. Joshua Norton was just this random crazy guy from San Francisco who hated all this political nonsense that was going on at the time and figured he could do the job better at it himself. And thus the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico was born. While he held no real power, the people liked him so much that they treated him like royalty anyways. Any currency issued under his name was treated like real money at many establishments. One day, he was arrested by a private security force because of his mental health, which enraged practically all of San Francisco. The police chief let him go because he had committed no crime, and Norton gave an imperial pardon to the guy who arrested him. After this incident, any police officer Norton passed would salute him. Another time, when a riot had formed and was getting pretty violent, Norton simply stood in front of the mob and calmly prayed, which managed to disperse the mob, and that's not even a fraction of the crazy stuff that he did. Jack, a baboon who was employed to change rail signals. After initial skepticism, the railway decided to officially employ Jack once his job competency was verified. The baboon was paid 20 cents a day, and a half bottle of beer each week. It is widely reported that in his 9 years of employment with the railroad, Jack never made a mistake. Spartan weddings. Basically, young Spartans would train for years in camps, surrounded only by men. So, when the time came for marriage, the women would shave their heads and dress in men's clothing, since the idea of having sex with anyone other than a man weirded out the grooms. For Auschwitz prisoners stole Nazi uniforms and a car. Only one of them was speaking German, so he was wearing the highest rank uniform. When they left the camp, they've encountered two patrols. First patrol, with some high rank guy, just hailed to them. Second patrol with to low rank soldiers told them they can't leave because orders etc. Guy speaking German started screaming at them so loud and so realistically they just said, "We're sorry, go ahead." The life of Harriet Tubman. One of the rare examples of someone who is a household name for being a badass who was actually about 10 times more badass than people know about. Things she did other than the Underground Railroad. 1. She financed and recruited for John Brown's Harper's Ferry slave revolt raid, and the only reason she didn't fight in person was she was bedridden with malaria. 2. During the Civil War, she joined the Union Army as a cook nurse. 3. She somehow class shifted into a spy scout and helped Union leaders plan raids into Confederate territory, and she assassinated several Confederates. 4. She rose in the ranks until she commanded a small raiding force of 300 Union troops from the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment, the second Black Ops Army unit ever. 5. Her command, Company C, 54th, raided southern plantations, slaughtered slave drivers, and freed captive slaves. 6. In the Combahee Ferry raid, where the 54th freed 700 slaves, she was also in command of 3 Union frigates, and when a Confederate division was advancing on them she fired broadsides from the 3 naval warships directly into the enemy troops. 7. She survived the war, and immediately turned around and started fighting for women's suffrage. The Biafran genocide. Aka, the Nigerian Civil War. It happened only about 50 years ago and over 3 million civilians died. My dad fought in the war as a child soldier on the Biafran side. You've probably never heard of it, despite its scale and recency, because it's been almost entirely swept under the rug. They don't even teach it in history classic. In 2007 a paraglider got trapped in the updraft of two joining thunderstorms and was lifted to an altitude of 33,000 feet. She landed over 3 hours later about 60 kilometers north of her starting position, having survived extreme cold, lightning and lack of oxygen. 33,000 feet is how high commercial planes fly, and extremely unlucky recreational paragliders. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. A tank filled with 2 million gallons of molasses burst and sent a tidal wave of molasses through the streets of Boston. 21 people were killed. The Great Stink was an event in central London in 1858. The hot weather exacerbated the smell of untreated human waste and industrial effluent that was present on the banks of the River Thames. Dancing Plague of 1518. It wasn't even an isolated incident, multiple dancing plagues happened over the course of a few centuries. Strasbourg in 1518 was just one of the bigger ones. The escape from Antarctica by the members of the Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. The stuff they went through was unbelievable. Their boat, the Endurance, was crushed by ice floes. They were stranded on the floes for over a year in temperatures well below freezing. They then took to 3 boats around 22 feet in length across the Antarctic Ocean looking for land. There were about 10 men in each boat. They missed reaching land by just a few miles at times. 2/3 of them got stranded on Elephant Island surrounded by ice while one of the boats went out in search of rescue. That boat made it through the Drake Passage, one of the deadliest places in the ocean. All but 3 of them got stranded with little food and water, while the 3 men who left became the first people to cross South Georgia on foot. They found civilization, rescued the men who came through the Drake Passage, waited months until they could rescue those on Elephant Island. Every single person who came on the initial voyage survived, with the worst lasting consequence being a single foot amputation. Best comment of the day. Straight from Google, as I couldn't remember the details correctly. According to the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Shu General Zhuge Liang had to defend a town with a mere 100 troops against an army of 150,000. He hid his men, flung open the gates, and sat on the walls playing a lute. The opposing general of Wei, Sima Yi, certain it was a trap, ordered a retreat.